We're live, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, and welcome, members. Welcome to this strategy scrutiny meeting. It's really good to see so many people here. Diane, please could we have substitutes or apologies?
Yes, Chair. We have Councillor Brundell, although she's not quite arrived yet, substituting for Councillor Megan Swift. And we have apologies from Councillor Megan Swift and Councillor Thornber.
Perfect. And we'll take care of Councillor Brundell when she arrives. Item number 2, members' interests. Does any member have any interest? Yes, Councillor Kingston.
Yes, I'm a member of the West Yorkshire Joint Services Committee, and we've got a report from the director this evening.
Perfect, and you'll that's all noted, and you'll have to tell us about your fantastic trip, and be prepared, Andy, for some heavy scrutiny tonight from Councillor Kingston. So that sounds like a good experience to me. Very good. Item number 3, admission of the public. Yes, the public are allowed. We are live on YouTube. Item number 4, minutes of the last meeting held on the 7th of February this year. Are there any comments on the minutes at all? No. In that case, can I propose them as a true and accurate record? Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? Good. Thank you very much. Item number 5, deputations. I don't believe we've got any deputations this evening.
There are no deputations this evening, Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Diane. Item number 6. Right, onto the substance. Welcome to Andy. This item is on the West Yorkshire Joint Services update. Andy, welcome to this strategy scrutiny meeting. It's the best scrutiny committee in Calderdale, so you've really drawn a good slot this evening. So welcome, and over to you. We've got your report, but over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and evening members and colleagues, and thanks for having me today. I'm the Director of West Yorkshire Joint Services. I've been in post for 2 years now, and I've got 30 years in local authority experience, so I bring all that experience to the joint services. This is the part of a round of attending all local authority overview and scrutiny committee or equivalents for the 5 district councils, and the aim is to inform members of the work of joint services that we do on behalf of each district council. It's been a number of years, I believe, since this has been done, and we're just trying to reform those relationships and improve communications and relationships going forward. So my report in the papers has some activity that we've done in the Calderdale district in the last 12 months, and it also includes the statutory work that Joint Services does on behalf of Calderdale. I'm just going to give you some budget context. The net budget for Joint Services in 23-24 is 4.8 million. We have an income of approximately 5 million. The local authority contributions from the 5 districts is 4.6 million. Calderdale's contribution is 7.7%, and that is based on a formula worked out on the populations of West Yorkshire, and that's your share based on your population. So the funding that you provide through the local authority contributions is around 559,000, and that equates to about £1.74 per head. So just again, some background information. When I came to Joint Services, I reviewed the service business plan that we have for a 3-year period, and I scanned across all the council's priorities to ensure that Joint Services contributes to all 5 councils' priorities in any which way we can in our service delivery. Those priorities for us are across 4 connected themes. That's economic growth, which you would imagine ties into your strong, thriving towns and places. We have environment and heritage, safer, stronger and healthier communities. And then we have our own priority internally for the modernisation agenda, but ensuring that we maintain core activities. So what I would like to do now, Chair, is I'm not going to go through my report in detail as that's part of the papers, but I just want to highlight or showcase two areas, two of our largest statutory services, and that is firstly trading standards, and then I'll talk a little bit about archive services. So in terms of trading standards, they've got a fantastic or excellent reputation nationally. We really do punch above our weight despite some severe funding challenges. And why I say that is, if you looked at some comparators, trading standards is funded equates to about £1 a head of the population in West Yorkshire. Our nearest comparator in the Southwest model is £2, £12 per head, and my last authority was £2.34 per head. So we have to work on the basis that we've got the budget we have, and we set our stall out to do what we can with that budget. So we adopt an intelligence-led approach to enforcement. In West Yorkshire, we have a high level of criminal activity. I've worked in the northeast. I've worked for many years in the Yorkshire and Humber, and from that outside perspective, there's some big issues in West Yorkshire. But when you get in and working in this area, you realise how high levels those criminal activities in a trading standards perspective. So what we have to do, we have to use a prioritisation model to allocate resources to key priority areas, and those are listed in the pack. But we're very much a reactive response aimed at targeting and disrupting criminal activity. We do very minimal preventative work, which isn't ideal, because the model should be that the more early interventions you can do, the greater impact you have, but we don't have that luxury. So I just want to showcase some highlights from the report. We do a lot of work around illegal tobacco. That is quite prevalent in West Yorkshire. We do a lot of work around underage sales to minors. It's mainly vapes and tobacco and alcohol. We do go on intelligence again, intelligence-led model, to try and work out where the illicit tobacco is being sold. And we very much do the disruption tactic of seizures and prosecute those where they meet the strict criteria to take those individuals to court. The sort of when we come to looking at illicit tobacco, this is a front door operation for organised crime. Buyers view this as a harmless activity because they're buying cheap products. But actually what they don't realise is they're funding wider criminal activity, which could be drugs, human trafficking, modern slavery, prostitution. And what our aim is to try and raise awareness with the public that when they buy illicit tobacco, they are funding some bigger crime issues. We've worked around the recent challenges with the cost of living crisis. We've focused on respect to fuel and food businesses in order to protect both citizens and businesses. So for one of the examples we look for in food businesses, which isn't sort of well known, when there's a challenge on prices and prices increase worldwide, individual restaurants or takeaway outlets, they can be known to substitute expensive almonds for peanuts, and then that causes problems for people who have allergies who do not realise what the dangers are of a product that's not labelled correctly. Another big area for us is the West Yorkshire Financial Exploitation and Abuse Team, otherwise known as WIFE. The remit is to try and reduce the impact on unscrupulous individuals and criminal gangs that target our most vulnerable individuals in our populations and our communities. Again, we apply intelligence to do disruption tactics, because these people are out to fraudulently take away individuals' savings. We are all in this call can be vulnerable to a scam or a fraud or doorstep crime on illegal traders on our doorstep. But these these individuals and unscrupulous gangs target our most vulnerable, those who don't have the wherewithal to protect themselves. And our aim through this work is to keep individuals in their homes as long as possible, to reduce the burden on each local authority's adult and social care services. There are too many individuals who lose their life savings, and there are barriers associated with that. Those who are vulnerable do not report this activity. The level of crime is actually underreported because there is a stigma with being scammed. And those individuals won't tell the families, they won't tell sort of agencies, because they want to stay in their own homes, and they believe that if they tell anybody they're being scammed, that people view them as not being able to live in their own homes and find themselves in alternative accommodation that it's expensive, it draws on care budgets, so that they do not underreport. And we have to try and change that attitude and that approach. So one of the areas we're using at the moment is a project called Operation Athena. And this is to raise awareness of rogue trader activity in West Yorkshire communities. Again, it's an intelligence-led activity on our part. We've been working since this operation started in each of the local authorities, but in Calderdale, we've been working in 16 residential areas. And those are usually the areas that have been targeted by these gangs. And what these gangs do, and these individuals, they find a victim and they target them and repeatedly take their fraudulent activity because they see it as an easy hit. And our role is to try and break that cycle by target hardening those victims. And this is where the officers of WIFI come in. And there is a number of ongoing projects to try and encourage communities to report this activity, whether it be to an agency, a family member. We are working with people who go into people's homes, who could be hairdressers or chiropodists, and try and get them to be aware of the signs of someone who's been victimized. There are a number of ongoing investigations in Calderdale that have been carried out by Trading Standards, but because they are live investigations, I cannot talk to you about them. What's in the report is the ones that have been concluded, and you can see the case results and the outcomes of what activity has gone on. So if I turn now, Chair, to the Archive Service, again, these have an excellent reputation nationally. They're recognised leaders in how to move, pack and label collections. They use a barcoding system that other archive services come to learn how we've done these, and we're seen as a leading light for best practice. And that's because over the time in the 5 areas, we've done multiple moves. We act as a designated place of deposit for your statutory public records. And what goes with that is we have some fantastic assets in Calderdale. I'm really impressed with the building that we share with the library services. But one of the things that is a problem for us is the cost of keeping the archives in an environmentally controlled condition to prevent mold. So what we're trying to do is experiment with how we turn off the air conditioning and the heating for a period of time and monitor whether there's any adverse conditions, and when I mean that, whether we get any mold outbreaks. And so far, we're looking at those to try and reduce our energy costs as a way of trying to help our budget, really. Another key activity of the Archive Service is stakeholder engagement and enabling the public to have access to our archives. We are subject to an accreditation scheme from the National Archive Service, and that requires us across the West Yorkshire footprint to be open for 105 hours per week. But currently we only achieve 85 hours per week across the patch, which is 19% below the required target. And that's directly linked to resources. Again, we're underfunded and we can't achieve that target. One of the key things that I'm really proud of, that is we contribute to the culture of Calderdale, and that's through the work we do with Anne Lister. And I think that's well documented, and it's in the report. And you know, it's local, regional, and national visitors that come or engage or online with the activities we do. So Chair, that's me summing up, and I'll open up to any questions, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. That is really brilliant. And thanks again for the detailed report. Members, if you want to use the raise hand function, but I'll kick off first. Usually I wait till the end, but whilst you're all getting the raise hand function sorted, Andy, could you just remind us about the this vape situation? I know you go into 3 cases in the report in quite a lot of detail. I mean, you know, the fines, and I know you're not in control of the fines because obviously it goes to the magistrates, etc. They do seem a bit lenient to me, but that's just, you know, I know you've got no control over that. What is, so specifically, what is the law around vapes? Could you just flesh that out in a bit of detail? Not detail, just a bit of an overview of you know, what the law is in this area.
So obviously they can't sell to under 18s. That is a complete no. It's against the laws. When we refer to oversized vapes, the legal limit for the size of what they refer to, the tank, cannot contain any more than 2 millilitres of nicotine. Anything above that size is illegal. We have other issues around vapes that come in that are imported that may be compliant with another country, but they're not compliant with the laws of this country in terms of what is in those prescribed, one for a better word, additives that can be allowed into these vapes. So they're also illegal, and it's a difficult task, Chair, because it's well documented how many of our young people are getting access to vapes. You know, there's quite a lot of prevalence in and around schools. Schools are having a tough task at the moment, trying to keep them out of schools, and a lot of it, we have sort of discussions around how we can supplement the work that public health are doing. They're trying to get adults off tobacco onto vapes, but the message is, if you don't smoke, don't vape. And we work quite closely with your public health colleagues.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the flavour of these you know, vapes, they're very, very addictive. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
And someone I know very close to me is a nurse, and they mentioned that the amount of admissions they've got now of people who are very, very, very young, you know, in the 30s and 40s with lung problems, is absolutely huge. And we're walking into a huge issue here. So thank you for your work that you're doing in regards to that, because undoubtedly, you know, it's going to be a huge epidemic in a number of years, in very little time, actually. So thank you, Andy.
And obviously it's a hot topic, and it's government are looking at it right now, and there's consultations out on how things will be labelled, and whether there could be disposable vapes in the future, and on all those flavourings that are actually, you know, we all know is an attraction to young people.
Not least because they're littering my local park as well.
Yes, and the environmental environmental aspects of it, not environmental health.
Yeah, exactly. But also, yeah, thank you, Councillor Carney.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. By the way, it was very very informative. Like the detail. But the question I've got, it's actually been sort of provoked a wee bit by your sort of covering, verbally covering the, you know, the trading standards bit and the Y-feet bit in particular. I was just sort of wondering, like, we as councillors, we do a fair bit of talking to people on their doorsteps, and I was just sort of wondering, is there a quick way that we can if something happens on a doorstep, or we, suspect something that might be in like Wi-Fi's world, is there a way that we can alert you so that, you can do a sort of light touch initial contact, sort of, like way of sort of seeing if, if we're wide of the mark or whether we might be right? Is there a way that we can get in touch with you for that sort of thing?
Yes, and I will ensure we share the contact details and the routes into Wi-Fi subsequent to this meeting, Councillor.
Cool. So I don't know, the officers can share that with all members when it comes
Yes,
in there.
yeah. And we have some comms assets as well, Councillor, that we can share that will just raise awareness of fraud, which a lot of members ask for, and we're happy to do that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Kingston.
I think Councillor Carr was before me, Chair. Don't want to queue jump.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Carr.
Oh, I won't take it personally, Chair.
No, it's definitely not.
First of all, the report was brilliant. It was so interesting. So thank you for sending it our way. And it was actually just to actually a bit about what councillors Robson and Kearney have talked about. With the vaping in particular, who is it that actually gets prosecuted? Can, like, in health and safety law, it can be the person doing it, or it can be the shop owner or what have you, or is there a case that both of those can?
Councillor Carr, thanks for your feedback, by the way. So that it generally it sits between the owner of the business and the person who's selling. So we can have some unfortunate circumstances where somebody has joined a business and haven't had the proper training, and they do the actual physical sale, and unfortunately they get prosecuted as well. And that all that sort of mitigation comes in, but the real perpetrator is the business, and it might be the director or an individual if it's a sole trader, and we have instances where both parties are taken to the courts.
And again, just to reiterate what Councillor Kane said, it'd be useful to have that information, because I know any of us that have got kids at the secondary could probably give a list of shops that are selling vapes to kids. That'd be a really useful resource to have. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, I can sort that out.
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask about the fines service. I'll just talk a little bit about the archive service, though, and the History Centre in Wakefield, which I would highly recommend. It is open to the public a number of times in the week, and they've got a permanent exhibition on there, which occasionally changes. At the moment, it's a medieval exhibition, so you can go and see the founding charter for Mount Grace Priory and things like that. For me, that was really wonderful to see those original things from so long back, and seeing Anne Lister's signature as well. That was pretty special. The fine service, Andy. How is that advertised? How do people find out about the fine service so that they know that they can bring along their fines to these sessions that you have in Calderdale a few times a year? How would they know that?
Councillor Kingston, I need to check how it's advertised. I think we do some promotion, but I wouldn't like to confirm that without double checking. But I can get back to you on that one.
Okay. And I know from recent meetings I've been in with the committee that there's a problem with the Kirklees archive at the moment. Is that going to affect Calderdale in any way? Does that have any negative impact for Calderdale?
We have just had the National Archives accreditation audit assessment team in 2 weeks ago. So we are waiting for their findings, and they did go to every local authority. So there is potential, because of the conditions in what is known as red doors, that might have an impact on the accreditation.
Mhm.
However, if that was the case, we would be looking at ensuring that Calderdale maintain their accreditation, and we would be getting into negotiations with the National Archives, because just for everyone's benefit, a decision some time ago when we went for this accreditation or had to join into this accreditation, we had a choice to make whether we went for 5 individual accreditations or one across the whole of the West Yorkshire footprint. Well, for scales of costs and economies and maintaining the accreditation, it was decided at the time to go for a pan West Yorkshire one, and ideally that's where we want to be, but we're not going to put those authorities at risk who meet the standards and will get the accreditation status. We could end up with if the worst happened, Councillor Kingston, we could end up with a four district council accreditation. That could be the worst case now, but hopefully not. We hopefully will maintain the 5.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kingston. I want to bring Mike in at this point, because Mike, I understand that Place Scrutiny has conducted some work about the sale of knives. I wondered if you could just inform the meeting about what's been discussed on that panel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Brundell was at the meeting of Place when this was discussed. So our Place Scrutiny Board has done a detailed review on knife crime in Calderdale, and the conclusions were that we have lower rates of knife crime in compared to people in West Yorkshire, but it's still a big issue, and there's lots of excellent sort of preventive and other work going on. But one of the things that cropped up in some of the discussions was about access to knives and other blades for people for children and young people. And I don't think you mentioned that in your report, Andy, but I think you do have a role in that.
There's a good reason, Mike, for not mentioning it, because we aren't the enforcement authority in West Yorkshire. So there's various models across the country. Some have the authority or the authorization, I should say, that would do underage sales of knives and offensive weapons. But in West Yorkshire, the model is that sits with the West Yorkshire Police, and that is why I've never mentioned it.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, I'd like to thank Andy for coming. Thank you for the comprehensive report. And sorry, Councillor Carney.
Sorry, I've got a wee sneaky one.
Yeah, go on, crack on.
I was just kind of flicking through the report again. I saw the photograph of the sort of pieces of stone, and I remembered like yesterday when I was on like a planning site visit. There's quite an old property in Scrutiny it looks so there's I don't know even what you call them, but sort of like stone bits that are going to get taken away to create a parking space, and they looked like quite old. Is that something that I mean they're probably a lot younger than these things that are photographed there. But is that something that we could sort of like, I don't know, approach the owner of the property and sort of point them in your direction? Is it?
I suppose if there's 2 elements to this. There's the sort of the fines liaison officer where there's people who go and sort of find what they believe is treasure, and we have a very high number of metal detectorists in our region, and so that's one way. But if it was something to do with maybe part of archaeological statutory services, that usually forms through the planning authority, and we act as a statutory consultee. So it's a strange one, Councillor Kenny. We would issue advice, but I believe the enforcement sits with the planning authority if that was deemed to be an archaeological stone. If it's just general stone, I'm not quite sure where that would sit.
No, it wasn't from like an enforcement point of view. It was just kind of along the lines of if it was going to end up in a skip, but it could be like we donated somewhere via you, I don't know.
Well, what if it was of an archaeological interest, then I would suggest it is referred in to us for a check, because what we wouldn't like to see is something of archaeological interest suddenly disappearing off a site and finding itself propping up someone's stone wall in the garden. If that sort of kind of analogy is what you're thinking of.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'll maybe contact you offline and
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Barnes?
see what I'm doing.
It's not in a conservation area, that property, Stuart, nor is it's Victorian, so I don't think it would fit.
Ah, right. I don't know what they're called. It's the bits that go around the perimeter.
Balustrade.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, in that case, Andy, thank you for coming, and thank you for presenting. You're doing some great work, and long may it continue.
Thank you, and
so thank you very much.
And thanks you all for your support, and obviously Councillor Kingston is a really good advocate of ours. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time and listening. And we'll see you in another time probably.
We'll note that in Councillor Kingston's performance review. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye everyone. Thanks again. Bye.
Great. Bye. Okay then. On to the next item. So we've got item number 7, the Cabinet report on the third quarter projected outturn report, and then the revenue and capital monitor. Lee, I believe so. We've got your report in front of us. Is there anything key highlights or anything you want to address?
So the report speaks for itself. Most of the detail is within the appendix, and I think overall, basically, we're saying that it's pretty much the same as the second quarter. So there's not been any deterioration in the council's finances, between the second and third monitors. So it's a relatively stable position. Further down the appendix as well gives an estimate of what we think reserves will be at the year end. And that's been mimicked again in the MTFP that has been to Cabinet and has formed part of the Budget Council papers. So over the 3-year period, so 24-25, 25-26, 26-27, again, there's a relatively stable position in terms of our reserves. So in the first year, Budget Council approved the use of an extra £2.9 million worth of reserves. In the second year, it was, I think, 300,000 thereabouts. In the third year, there's 2.3 million going back into reserves. So it's showing a relatively stable position. Obviously, that's subject to future overspends on the budget. So that's probably all I would say, just as a very quick summary of the position.
Cool. So it's noting the reserves, but with a health warning, essentially, with a massive caveat on future. Great. Councillor Dacre, shall I bring you at this stage before we go on to Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, because just again by way of introduction, because Lee's right that the actual projected outturn for the end of the year remained relatively similar to that from the second quarter, but the devil's in the detail when you do get down to the appendix, where most directorates had made good progress in bringing overspends down, but adults have actually suffered a worsening position. And again, the appendix goes into the details of why that is. And a lot of it's simply, and people who are familiar with children's will know this, will sort of be familiar with this kind of problem. It's about some very high cost placements, which just blow your projections out of the water, and over which we have a limited degree of, very limited ability to control. What I'd just like to say about that is that adults are currently coming under some quite rigorous oversight, both within the directorate itself, from the director and assistant director, but then also from relevant members of the cabinet and chief executive, to both assist and oversee how we try to work with adults to bring that budget down by the end of the year. And I certainly, having been in some of those meetings, I was really impressed by the work that they're doing to deal with some of the issues that they faced historically, and how to control costs and how to move forward. And one of the things that's already happening is that there are measures in place which will save money in the end, but at the moment those are overlapping with the provision that's costing us more. So we're trying to ensure that people are cared for at home rather than in institutions, which will bring the costs down. But at the moment, we've both got the fact that we're trying to spend money upfront on care of some people in the community, if I can use that phrase, or at home, but we've still got people who are in expensive residential accommodation who maybe either can't now be moved out because it's too late to change things, or we haven't yet been able to put them at home with suitable support. And in time, the switch to the more basic, the emphasis on prevention and keeping people at home will ultimately both be better for them because they can stay in their own environment, but also better for the council's budget. So I think that's quite important to be aware of. As Lee said, yes, reserves, Section 1.5 officer has to certify they're adequate, and she has done so, but she will also always say to you, can only be used once. We have to be very careful. In terms of the capital programme, because that's all about revenue, the capital programme is summarised there with all the details. The progress always changes. What's coming in and out of the capital schemes changes all the time through the year, which is why there's slight variations from the last monitor. People tend to gloss over the capital one because it sort of looks always the same each year, and it always tells you that the details of the current schemes and the sources of funding, i.e. grants, borrowing and pooled resources. So nothing else really to say, but again, like Lee, happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. I think Councillor Barnes had his hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. Not really a question, a bit of a statement, and sorry, my internet kept blobbing, so I missed some of Councillor Dacre's pearls of wisdom there. Actually, by saying the outturn is the same, has actually disguised a couple of things. One, some significant savings that have been produced within that, and yes, the adult situation is not great. So I mean, and I think just for the purposes of for this committee's purpose, that obviously this has been picked up as well by Adult Scrutiny. It was reviewed, their transformation plan, at the last meeting. There's been a subsequent meeting with Councillor Blackburn and myself, with the director, assistant director. So it is something that Adult Scrutiny is on top of as well. So I think there's quite a lot of focus being put on there and quite a lot of scrutiny put on there. And I think it would be wrong for this committee not to be made aware of that. So that was all it was. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's a very fair comment. Councillor Carr?
Can I have a quick one before my main one? I don't know if you'd know the details of this, Councillor Dacre, but in adults, there's those 3 very, very high cost placements that are referenced. Are they out of area placements? Have we got a similar issue that we have in children's in some out of area costs being high?
Don't know.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if that would be in the detail. The other thing I wanted to say is that how are we addressing the high kind of cost in HR, but in temporary and supply kind of work? Because I know particularly in legal, they've referenced about, I think it was just over £500,000 in locum or outline in locum fees and things. And are we actively trying to recruit in legal? Because I do know that if you Google legal jobs at Calderdale Council, none come up. There's only one for West Yorkshire. So have we got a plan to lower that really high cost of locum locum, I don't know if fees is the right word, or charges, and I assume that's replicated in other areas in agency fees.
Do you want me to come back on that, Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So no, I don't think you can draw parallels across the board necessarily with what is happening in legal. There are some occasions when it's difficult to recruit in other areas, and you may find that you have to get a specialist. But legal has had a long-standing problem with this. I say problem, it's not their problem exactly, it's the problem of the legal market. And they have tried various things to try to reduce it, but what they tend to find, and they do have working in conjunction with HR, they most definitely do have a programme in place to attempt to increase the number of permanent lawyers as opposed to the number of locums. And they have had some success, and they use specialist agencies, I think, to do this. I can't remember what the name of the companies that they use, but they have an almost permanent recruitment campaign, and the avenues that they've been using have, as I say, have brought in some permanent staff, and they've also had success, for instance, in recruiting staff who've been either left and gone somewhere else and come back, or who have been locums and have become permanent. But what they find is that no sooner have they recruited people than someone else leaves, and it's just a constant battle to try to keep the numbers up. They've slightly reorganised the department in order to try to make the roles more attractive and address some of the salary issues, but there is just no way that any council can compete with some of the fees that you might get in private practice. And some of the lawyers obviously have, well, they all have transferable skills, but some of them have specialisms which enable them to walk straight into jobs in private practice and earn substantially more at a level that the council could simply never match. So we have focused very heavily in the past on the fact that a lot of the legal work can be done remotely, so we don't necessarily have to recruit people who live locally, and they don't necessarily have to come into the office. But of course, in a way, the pandemic disadvantaged us in that sense, because now lots of other organisations are equally keen to offer that kind of working, whereas in the past that perhaps weren't. So in answer to that, yes, there's very much a plan, but it's a never-ending struggle. Every time I have meetings with Ian Hughes, and every time I meet him, this is an item on our agenda, and he will tell me who they've recruited, and he will tell me that X are resigning to go elsewhere or retiring.
Yeah. And is this a problem then that lots of councils are facing? Because I understand in the legal profession there must be that. And likewise, are there a lot of lawyers? Because now that in teaching and in medicine you get the same thing, that people deliberately choose to be temporary. Is that an issue in the legal profession generally, that people see that as an appealing career choice, as opposed to in some jobs it's kind of a stopgap?
Yes, I think there's an element of that, but almost every case is different, but there are certainly some people who I think that who have acted for us as locums, that we've tried to encourage to become permanent, and they just don't want to, because they don't want that commitment, or for whatever reason it suits their life to be a locum. And you're just never going to attract that sort of person, no matter what you do. And you have to, and I forgot to say, we also try to grow our own and help people progress through through in the job. But then, of course, the risk is that when you've progressed them, they go off and get a better job, paid job elsewhere. So,
yeah, thank you.
Just on the back, before I bring in Councillor Carney, just on the back of that point, is there any opportunity? We all know that the problem is that the public sector pays less. You know, that is the fact, and that's why people tend to flirt between both. Is there any opportunity for legal, and it could be applicable to other areas as well, to essentially have a lawyer or legal officer, whatever level of lawyer they are, to work for us and also work for another local authority such as Kirklees or Leeds or wherever, and then we can boost their salary by means of splitting it half and half with another local authority?
they've tried that in the past and it just hasn't worked because, of course, everybody wants the lawyer to do their work, and there's a certain amount of work to do, so it just doesn't really solve the problem, because you'd just have to if you tried it across West Yorkshire, even supposing you could get people to agree, you'd just still have to recruit more of them to do the work across the whole area. And so they certainly had I think it was, I can't remember how long ago it was, but there was some sort of sharing system between one or two of the authorities, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, Councillor Carr.
Oh, do we have, and I suspect we don't have it yet, but could we offer like level 5 or whatever it is apprenticeships, so we could get people in young and train them up?
I think we have done that, and we will consider it if there are people who are interested. It's not everybody wants to do that, but yes, it's those kind of things are there as an option. But as I say, the danger is that you then lose them when you've invested all of that effort in, because quite rightly, they may want to try something different or go somewhere else or have you.
Thank you.
If it was easy to solve, HR and legal between them, and Jackie is extremely innovative, Jackie Addison, head of HR, they would have solved it, but it's just they just haven't succeeded.
It is a difficult situation, and I totally appreciate when you say after COVID, you know, our key selling point sort of diminished, because then the private sector end up going all working at home, and the key attraction sort of dwindled. It's a really interesting point that Councillor Carr raises, and it's something which I think we could do some future work on. Specifically, the possibility. I note what you say about the ensuring that each local authority, if it was a split model, would get their fair share of that lawyer. I completely appreciate that does have practical implications, but that could be resolved through a tight service level agreement. And also, in terms of the grow your own, that can be resolved through the so-called golden handcuffs. I know it's not to everyone's taste, but many law firms in the private sector, if you end up leaving, you have to repay your tuition fees, and that's how they tend to keep the talent. So it's something which we can take away, and maybe in conjunction with Councillor Dacre and everyone, we could do some quite interesting work in that sphere.
Sorry, I was going to say, in relation to the golden handcuffs, the experience generally of the council in various areas has been that private companies poaching people will just pay off the golden handcuff for them, because for them it's trivial, and so it doesn't actually and you can't have too large a penalty that it becomes a restraint of trade, so it's just tended to be worthless in the council.
Councillor Canny, I will bring you in, but Councillor Barnes, I think you put your hand up in a reaction.
Yeah, it was just we've raised the issue, and I can't remember where it was. And Councillor Dacre may jog my memory about, professional fees and what have you. I can't remember whether it was at an audit, and no, I'm struggling to remember when it was, and I think we came to the conclusion that it was just impossible to push for that. So, and that aspect of it, the annual professional fees, has been covered and discussed at another committee, but I'm struggling to remember where it was. Sorry about that, Chair, for my very poor memory on that.
No,
I still
can't
thinking
remember.
about it.
Yeah, I can't remember where it was, and there's some fees that we will pay and some that we won't. Yeah,
governance.
It could have been. I just cannot remember, but yeah, I agree. It's been discussed.
Yeah, no problem. I don't blame you, Councillor Barnes. You know, you sit on every single panel going, so I don't blame you for being able to.
Well, if it's not me, it's Stuart. So when he gets his hair cut, we could be the same person. Yeah.
Great, Councillor Carney.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I kept my hand up just purely because you'd mentioned it, but when you came in, you sort of mentioned the same sort of thing, but about like sharing legal services or sharing individual lawyers across, across authorities. How deep has it been looked into? I mean, I suppose West Yorkshire will have legal services as well. Is there any way of sort of like pooling the resource at all, to spread this, if some places doing a bit less work than they normally do, which is probably unlikely, share the workload type thing, then?
That's the problem, that they all have equal desire for the same people doing the same quantity of work. So if you had one lawyer trying to cover, say, Kirklees and Calderdale, you'd be expecting them to do two people's work, because there isn't really a time when there's a slack time in Calderdale and they can hop over to Kirklees and do the work there. So you'd just have to employ two people between you, which really would defeat the object. And West Yorkshire, the combined authority, they're certainly not going to be up for sharing their people with us, because again, they're all fully. They probably suffer slightly less. I think they generally can pay higher rates than we do, but even they, don't always manage to fill posts, not necessarily legal, but generally. So they'd be exactly the same. That there's no slack to share.
It's a sad indictment, really, and I did come up with a solution. This was when Councillor Barnes and myself were on the strategy scrutiny meeting, or strategy scrutiny for West Yorkshire Combined Authority back in the day, and Councillor Barnes might remember my suggested solution, which involved, and it's a great idea. It involved a lawyer hub, and you could have a lawyer hub, and then you could have a planning hub, and essentially what would happen is every single local authority in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority provide monies for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to essentially employ lawyers or employ planning officers, whatever the scenario it would be, and then you'd have a centralised group of people within that profession, and then they just charge out to that local authority. So then it would work in that if we wanted a lawyer for 10 hours, they just charge us for 10 hours of their time. And then there's not any pulls on time, because that's how you make it fair. You only pay for the chunk of time that you've used. And it went down like a sack of spuds. But I do honestly think that if we do want to be cute about this, and I'm not just on about us at Calderdale, it's on about other local authorities as well. That's the only way through this recruitment problem, is joining forces and through economies of scale. providing competitive salaries. That was my vision for the way it should proceed. But I appreciate there wasn't any will in the room, really. I think that's more of a statement rather than a question, to be honest, Councillor Dacre. But there we go. Are there any other questions on this this item? Well, in that case, thank you, Lee and Councillor Dacre, for coming. The next item is on the review of the council's budget process. So it might be beneficial if you, Councillor Dacre stays, Lee, you're more than welcome to stay. But of course, if you've got better things to do, which you probably do, Lee, please do log off. So enjoy your evening. I always think when someone says enjoy your evening, well, you've only got a few hours left, but take that with the spirit it's intended. So thank you, Lee. Okay, on to item number 8, the review of the council's budget process. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me a second while. Yeah. All of you, I think, participated in the scrutiny of the budget process this year, leading up to the budget decisions of council in February. And you will almost all be aware that we did it a bit differently this year from previous years. Basically, we combined our efforts in having 2 workshops with all scrutiny councillors invited, rather than doing it across the 4 individual scrutiny boards. And that bit of work produced some recommendations about future budget processes. So there's which were discussed actually at strategy performance last month. So it was felt appropriate for you to have a discussion to review that process. I think I'd say in general, the feedback that I and Ben and Libby have had has been pretty positive, and that people found it a useful process and welcomed the input that Councillor Dacre in particular and Becky McIntyre and Lee put into that process. So by and large, we've had a positive approach. We've got some recommendations in the report, and we've got an appendix with 5 sort of points in it, some of which are, if you like, directed towards the cabinet process, and some of which are directed to the scrutiny process. And I thought I'd just very quickly go through those. So I will be quick, Councillor Robinson. I don't have a 50 slides presentation, unfortunately. But I'll just take a minute on that. I do think it would be helpful for the process if at the end of this discussion, the board decide whether they want to formally approve any of the recommendations, so that whatever you approve, we've got an agreed start point for the as far as scrutiny goes for the process next year, an agreed start point to make recommendations to cabinet. Or actually, I think, technically speaking, to Becky McIntyre, who recommends a process to cabinet. She tells me that's in the constitution. I mean, obviously, both Becky and cabinet may not agree with your recommendations, but I'll just very quickly go through those points. I'm sure Councillor Dacre or Lee is still here, isn't he? Where's he gone?
I think it's dialed off, but yeah.
Councillor Dacre may want to respond, or may want to hold off till later. But I'll just quickly go through the appendix 1. So members had a view that it would be useful to start the budget process a bit earlier. And last month you considered recommending that it start in November rather than start with the mid-January meeting of cabinet, which is when the budget proposals are first published. I got the impression that you might just be pushing at an open door on that one, but there seemed to be a view that it was all crammed into a fairly tight period of time between 2 cabinet meetings, and it might be beneficial to have a bit more time on that. So that's the first item you're asked to ask cabinet to consider. There were some views expressed that the initial report could have had a bit more detail in. and some of the proposals in the original cabinet document for consultation were described by a title and very little else. There was more information in the equality impact assessments, which were published after that, and there was more information in the report that Becky McIntyre circulated to you, but the report that Becky McIntyre circulated to you was an internal report rather than for to enable the public to have a bit more information as part of the consultation process. Councillor Prashad and Ben and myself visited Leeds recently, and the report they discussed on the budget was about 120 pages long, and we're not recommending that you get a 120-page report, but perhaps there's a happy medium. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory what that's about. The third one, which I think I would say is not one of the major points. There weren't equality impact assessments for all the proposals, and there weren't equality impact assessments for the growth bits. Some of which may have had a positive impact on equalities issues. For example, there was one, I believe, on domestic abuse. It's been pointed out by Becky and I think by Councillor Taker that the vast majority of the schemes did have equality impact assessments. But one of your roles, perhaps as a scrutiny board, or the workshops of all scrutiny boards, is to take an overall look at equalities. It's one of the council's priorities, is to reduce inequalities, and that may be helped by having a slightly more comprehensive set of equality impact assessments. As far as scrutiny goes, we've got two sort of areas for discussion. One is how did the scrutiny workshops go? Was it a good way of doing it? As I say, I've had the feedback I've had has been generally positive. The downside is that it could be 2 more meetings, although we could arrange your work programs for next year and future years to actually replace one scrutiny board meeting with this workshop, so you weren't constantly attending meetings in committee room B. And something that I think is something that you do need to pay attention to is making sure that you don't push scrutiny into private rather than doing it in public. And that's why we bring the proposals back to scrutiny board, to strategy and performance scrutiny board meeting in public. Your role as scrutiny councillors is to hold the cabinet and the executive of the council to public account, which means doing it in public. So I think there is a risk that you do your work in the workshops in private, and then the public don't get the same opportunity to scrutinise it. I think the one criticism, and I mean Councillor Taker may have a view on it, was we set a programme for the second workshop which looked at some of the strategic issues, and the members jumped understandably straight into the individual proposals, and perhaps we didn't pull back to do that helicopter view of assessing the whole budget proposals against council priorities in the way we could have done, but maybe that was too big an ask. And I think the other thing about, I would want to say about those workshops is it does enable all members of scrutiny boards to look at all the issues, and you may, as a member, be placed on one scrutiny board, but be really interested in another issue. And I know it was in the scrutiny meeting rather than the workshops, but if you remember, Councillor Robinson raised some issues, I think, in February about something that wasn't in the proposals about the Victoria Theatre. Now, had we done it scrutiny board by scrutiny board, that would have been an issue for place scrutiny board and not strategy and performance. So I think it does enable a wider participation from members. The final message is that you discussed last time, looking at budget issues effectively throughout the year in each scrutiny board, so that your work next year and the work of each scrutiny board next year will be to say to cabinet, how are your proposals going? Have you managed to implement them yet? Are there any problems? Are there any unforeseen circumstances? And there's a suggestion in the report that the quarterly monitor that you've considered earlier this evening might be a place for officers or cabinet to report on progress on implementing the decisions of council last month. And I think if that's okay, Chair, I'll shut up there and leave it for questions or comments and discussion.
Yeah, that's been very, very helpful. Thank you, Mike, for that summary. Councillor Carney.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mike. I'm fairly new in this role as a councillor, so I don't have as long a insight into how it worked before to compare with the new way. But I was wondering if that's sort of like feedback from councillors in general. But has there been feedback from cabinet and the executive as to how the different way of going through this process has worked compared with how previously? And I was also wondering if, because I know there was a few things that, you know, if you looked at the initial proposals, the final the final thing ended up slightly different in some areas. And I was just wondering if the new way meant that the opportunity that the 51 of us as councillors, or well, I suppose it'll be 45 or 44, I don't know, many cabinet is there, if that meant that there was a bit more influence coming from the wider group when it came to the budget process, or whether that had was about the same, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that, Mike?
Well, and Councillor Dacre might. I mean, just say, so we haven't had any formal feedback from anybody about the way we did it last year. We've had individual comments, and senior officers have. I think Ben was in a meeting the other day with senior officers said that they found it a helpful process. I suppose as the scrutiny officer, the senior scrutiny officer, I would say that all changes cabinet makes are solely down to the influence of scrutiny. But I wouldn't I? So I think if you remember the discussions, there were changes to the proposals about the Youth Justice Service from memory. And I think that got discussed in the scrutiny process, but I'd also know got discussed in other places. So I don't think you could actually say, Councillor Kearney, that the scrutiny work led to that change, but may well have been a part of influencing it.
Yep, Councillor Dacre.
Yeah, so no, I don't think there hasn't been any formal feedback, but I think Becky and myself have already indicated, and I'd again say it now, that we are certainly we agree that it would help everybody, including officers and cabinet and members and the public, if the process was brought forward, and that might be even earlier than November. That gives everybody more time to think about things and to look at ways, alternative options. But of course, I'd also caveat with the fact that similar discussions about services and what they're going to look like are going to carry on throughout the year, because the situation is just so desperate that we can't afford to just sit back and leave it for another budget cutting round, if you like, because we know that at the moment there's an overspend forecast for the following year. So it would be unwise to just sit back for the next few months and then just start thinking about it. So the process is going to carry on as part of the transformation that Becky's trying to put in train. So there's that. I think certainly Becky and myself have discussed the descriptions given of some of the options in the document, and it's clear from both what Scrutiny said, what our own group said, and what some of the consultees said, that some of those descriptions were not helpful and people didn't understand them. And I appreciate that you can provide more detail, but I do think there were some of them in particular that I felt in retrospect should have been described differently and more clearly. And it's easy perhaps for me to forget that, because I would have the detail behind it and would know. So you forget that actually somebody reading it cold just wouldn't necessarily know what you were talking about. And of course, again, starting the process earlier means it's potentially easier to try to make sure we do that. I think my understanding was with that time that this year was unusual because there was such a very large number of items on that list of savings, and often there is nowhere near that number of items. So it was made not doubly, but much more complicated this year. I think if we had attached all the equality impact assessments, it would have just become an incredibly unwieldy and lengthy document. And I think if they were done in this case, and I think if we were to make them available at all, it would probably not be within the consultation document, but would be within an area on the website or something like that where more detail could be seen. Or it might be that we still decide that we simply want a summary of the EIA at the time of the consultation, but it's certainly something we'll discuss, and we already have started discussing it. And it's like Mike says, how much detail you put in is always a balance, but I think we got that balance slightly wrong this time round. So I think mostly that's what I'd have wanted to come back on. In terms of the new method you tried for scrutiny, I felt and Becky felt that was really valuable. Yes, I agree with Mike. In the second meeting, it didn't quite go to plan, and we ended up focusing on particulars instead of trying to look at overarching themes. But it's difficult when it's the first time of doing that, and when because of the time, everybody had sort of only just seen the items and wanted to talk about them. So again, I think we liked it. We thought it was more useful to have that sort of framework around it, and I hope you'll be doing something similar for the next budget. And I mean, the whole point of a consultation is that you have to look at what people say and be open to taking note of some of it. Sometimes you might not be able to, sometimes you might decide that you simply can't and you cannot change, but that is why you have the consultation, because something may change as a result.
So very, 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 very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Dacre. Mike.
I mean, other members may have something else they want to say, but I think that what would be really helpful, Councillor Robinson, would be if the board was asked to effectively adopt this report. And as far as that, what that would mean would be that those issues that are for Cabinet, Councillor Dacre's given an initial response, but Cabinet and Becky will take away and decide what they wish to do. But for the scrutiny items, you as strategy and performance are suggesting that the items we have the same process next year. That's a scrutiny decision effectively. You organise your own business, and that you ask the other. Well, you put it that the other scrutiny boards should build these processes into their work programme during the year to look at implementation. So it's a process throughout the year, and Ben and Libby can take, if that's agreed by members, can take that away and build it into the work programmes of those scrutiny boards, and the participation in the workshops in whatever month of the year it might be, November and December, let's say, for the sake of argument. Thank you, Chair.
That's helpful. So Mike, whilst you're on, and I'll bring Councillor Barnes in a minute. So these recommendations will go to Cabinet ultimately for them to either approve or otherwise.
I think, Chair, I don't think, to be honest, they need to go to a formal meeting of Cabinet. I think it's a sort of fair, unless Councillor Dacre disagrees, but I think Councillor Dacre has already indicated that Cabinet are thinking about the proposals, the discussion.
They did. Sorry to interrupt, but they haven't been to Cabinet because they came as part of the consultation. So they've already been presented to us.
Yeah. That's fair. Right. Yeah. Councillor Barnes.
Well, I'm not sure whether that makes my point that I was going to recommend that we accept this, but and as Mike said, but I think from what Councillor Dacre said, I think that is shutting the stable door after the horse is bolted, isn't it? Eh? But I was going to propose that we recommend these and put it to a vote.
I think that there is further detail in this report. I'm sort of thinking if we're passing the recommendations without sort of recommending it anywhere, it's Mike.
Well, I think it would help for this report to be accepted, so that effectively you would be making strong recommendations to the other scrutiny boards, and we can take that as how we're going to do it next year, and that you are recommending, or as the body that's in, if you like, is in charge of finance, it's within your remit as far as scrutiny goes. It will be that we will then operate this process next year, and we've had the discussion, and Councillor Dacre has quite rightly pointed out that your report went to Cabinet from the February meeting of the Scrutiny Board. So it's in the Cabinet arena, and clearly from what Councillor Dacre said, Becky and herself have had lots of discussions about it already.
Yeah, perfect. Councillor Carney?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. But yeah, I mean, it's starting to sound as though, because normally we would, note a report and then, pass it on to Cabinet or whatever. But it sounds like we should be proposing to note the report and pass it on to the other three scrutiny boards to sort of say that we feel that, that we need to repeat this process and let it evolve. And hopefully they'll all agree and then participate the same way as they did this year.
Yeah, let's what about this? So let's pass. I'll propose this as a recommendation to this panel, noting the report, accepting the recommendations within the report, and for the recommendations to be sent to the Cabinet member and Becky, to recommend or to adopt this process to review the budget next year, for scrutiny officers to discuss the contents of the report and issues that have materialised from the process with other scrutiny board chairs, so that they can incorporate it into their agenda. And then finally, to thank scrutiny officers for their hard work and efforts in supporting members and creating the report. I'd like to propose that. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I was saying that.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Councillor Kai's second. Any alternatives? Nope. In that case, all those in favour, please. Great, and that is passed. I should have actually mentioned in that to thank Councillor Dacre and Becky as well for their for the hard work for their continuing hard work. I think if we can also chuck that in there. I know like the horse has bolted on that one, but I think we should chuck that in there as well. If we can just note that in the minutes, or also the recommendation, that would be appreciated. So I don't think anyone will disagree with that either. Good.
Thank you very much for that. I shall certainly pass it on informally to Becky as well. Perfect. Thank you. Great. Before we move on to the next item, so Councillor Dacre, you're more than welcome to stay, of course, if you've got, enjoy your evening. But thank you for attending the meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I shall go.
Great.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Before we go on to the work programme, now, Mike, this is your last scrutiny meeting for strategy and performance, I believe. Before you move on, is that correct?
I think so, Chair. Yes.
Yes. In that case, it's public knowledge, isn't it, Mike? Is it? Yeah. In that, I want to for those that you don't know, Mike is leaving us. He is going on to enjoy his life in retirement. I just wanted to say thank you to Mike for everything, his sterling support for the board. I believe it's 14 years at Calderdale Council, which is no mean feat. And then before that, I know you had many years at Bradford and at other local authorities as well. So you are local through and through, and your efforts and your hard work has made a difference in Calderdale. So I just wanted to thank you for everything from this panel, for everything you've done for us and indeed all the other scrutiny boards as well. You will definitely be missed, but it's nice that you have certainly forged a great path for Ben and Libby, who are going to take the reins now and continue to support us. And it's nice that you've passed on your knowledge and fostered them in a way which will certainly help their careers develop. So thank you, Mike, for everything. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything to Mike. Anna, yeah.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just go for it, shall I?
Yeah, crack on.
Say, Mike, that I've 3 years now that I've known you in Scrutiny. I knew nothing about Scrutiny before I became a councillor, and I've just been so impressed by your passion for leading us in Scrutiny, that you really know what you're doing and that you're passionate about supporting us to do it well. And that always comes across to me in the way that you intervene in meetings and speak to us outside meetings. I get it that you care about what you do, and that has an impact, definitely has an impact. You will have made a massive impact on services by supporting Scrutiny well. Thank you.
Perfect, well said. Dan?
Thank you, Chair. I've had a tooth out tonight, which is why I've been particularly quiet, but I'll speak up for this. Just to add, in recognition of all Mike's done, I've really appreciated the support he's always provided to me, and I know he has other people. But one thing I wanted to point out is that 14 years ago, Scrutiny was very different here in Calderdale. It was very treadmill at times, just going through the papers, going through what Cabinet was feeding us. And I think that over this period, I think Scrutiny has really transformed. It's become a very different process that looks at ideas holistically, produces ideas and solutions, and is genuinely contributive to what the council does. And you've been really instrumental in making that transformation happen, Mike. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, very nice. Councillor Carr?
Just for party parity, yeah, thank you, Mike. As you know, in the last year, I would have no idea what's going on at all if it wasn't for you. So thank you for all your guidance.
Perfect. Any other comments, members? In that case, I'll bring in Mike, if I may.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Robinson and everyone, for those really kind words. And Councillor Kingston said that I seem to know what I'm doing, which I think does prove that you can fool some of the people some of the time. It's been a privilege working with members from Calderdale over 14 years. It's been really, really good. And as I said at the Health and Wellbeing Board, it's been a pleasure most of the time. So thank you very much.
Have you got any plans, Mike? Have you what's on the agenda then?
I think members might have plans for this evening, Councillor Robinson, which probably yeah, I have plans. I won't be working, but I will be doing some good things as well as putting my feet up and reading some books.
Good stuff. Well, enjoy. Perfect. Thank you, Mike, for everything. Good. On to the work programme. Ben, any comments?
Well, probably I should be letting Mike do this item because I'm sure he'll do it far, far better than I will. And I'd just like to thank him for the support that he's given both me and Libby over the past year, which has been really appreciated by both of us. In terms of the work programme, as always, if members have an item that they'd like to place on the work programme, if they'd like to get in touch with me, and then I can scope it out and see if it's feasible. I've noted the comments to take to the other scrutiny boards, and Libby and I will start engaging with the chairs of those scrutiny boards as soon as possible to start planning how the budget process will work again next year using this as a model. And I'd just like to draw members' attentions to the fact that there is another scheduled strategy and performance meeting this year, I think at the back end of April, but there is nothing on the work programme for that currently, and I suspect that will be I suspect members may be rather busy doing something else at that time.
Perfect. In that case, anything from members at all? No. Well, in that case, I believe that's it. So, so thank you for attending, members. Thank you, Diane, for everything, for joining the meeting and everything you're doing behind the scenes. Thank you also to Mike and Ben, and of course members for contributing and officers for attending. So thank you and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, everyone.